whilst it's all good offering a question, why not offer them a resource which allows them to reflect upon any question you might have had? And I think that's really important because, again, after you do your peer reviews, you're going to have to go off and go back in your groups and think. And so I think if there's ever a time where a member of your cohort has offered you some research, I think that is a really good way of peer-to-peer kind of learning. Again, I think in terms of just using certain kinds of languages, I would refrain from using terms such as I or we. And this really, and I think definitely within the art sphere, it relates to kind of the idea of the ego or bringing any sort of abstract, emotive sort of reasonings or leanings into the space. And this also is a way that kind of it can get a bit tricky. So just, be, again, ask clear questions, but try and stay away from anything super personalized because it can come a very, back and forth conversation as well. Also, I would say, in terms of cross-team sharing, of course, open the dialogue and ask as many things or fact find as much as you can, but be careful not to monopolize all the time in terms of, any sort of Q&A that you may have. I think there'll probably be a lot of people, some more confident and some not, that will have difficulty maybe in speaking out during the peer review. And so I just think allowing the space for everyone in your group to just have time to talk and reflect is really, really important. Similarly, in terms of language, to be respectful, especially if there's language barriers or neurodiversity concerns. So for me in particular, I'm sometimes a bit slower in terms of just understanding what people are saying. And so I really appreciate, again, the clarity around any questions and also not using very very long or loaded words because it just takes me a long time to figure out what you're actually trying to say. And I think a lot of people will benefit from that, whether they have a disability or impairment or not. Again, what I said before about having criticality over criticism, and this just really helps the recipient to kind of form their own critical analysis of their own work and allows them to be self-reflective and kind of engage with their practice in a really different kind of way. So again, guys, critical is good and criticism not so much. So try your best and don't beat yourselves over the head if you probably ask something in not the right way, because again, people can ask for clarity, but just be really mindful about how you say things as well. And finally, I think that full group participation is always a really lovely thing. It's always really nice when you can present something and there are a lot of responses and a lot of people are really interested in what you're saying or finding out about more about what you're trying to say. So again, including any neurodiverse or intersectional approaches is really good. And again, bringing that part of yourself into your work or your group project will always just kind of really enrich that experience and will make people, I think, a lot more interested in what you're trying to say. So again, those are just some of the quick conventions. Again, they're not mandatory, but those are just some of the things I found have been really valuable for curating any space. And that's whether, it's defined by, your unit and the tutor telling you have to peer review, or maybe if you choose to conduct your own kind of mini peer reviews outside of lesson time. Again, guys, so it's coming towards the end of time now, and I don't want to talk too much at you. I'm not sure if anyone has any questions. I've seen some things popping up in the chat, but again, you can message me at any point, and you can get Liz and Stephen to ask me any questions about any of the conventions of the peer review and any outcomes, and kind of just really have fun with it. I think more than anything else, I think realizing that it's low stakes really. Peer reviews aren't meant to be this really sort of really tough thing that you have to negotiate every time you create work. So just remembering that's really important. Again, in any outcomes, and I think in the presentation of anything you do, you should be reminded of the collective nature of teamwork and of peer reviews and or crits whenever you do them. And just recognizing that whilst, everyone has their own solo input, that teamwork is really, really valuable to collective practice. In understanding the key conventions of concept generation, so from asking questions to maybe the aesthetic of your magazine, and any sort of key contacts that you want to include, that is really important to define very early on, which I think will just help you kind of to no end in terms of actually building a really sustainable practice. Again, to consider accessibility concerns, including language barriers. It will always be a fantastic thing if maybe you had some content and you found a way to translate it into maybe a few different languages That is just a really kind of considered approach in terms of just making your work as accessible as possible. This also relates to kind of aesthetic concerns. So maybe in terms of the different contrast you have in your particular magazine, or kind of ways of layout. I know particularly for those that suffer with dyslexia, it's good to have clear headings and subheadings and to do this consistently throughout. So just be thinking of those particular things are really, really important. And again, just to have a better understanding of your own work from the perspective of others, but also of the methodology or the way of working that others are doing as well. I think it's really important just to see what everyone else is doing, especially just during this time where we can't all be in one room, unfortunately, and just really offering as much critique as possible and allowing people to really make the use of this time. I think it's hard for us all, but definitely we've been afforded a bit more time to work through things. And I think this is really key for the peer review, in that a lot of things that are going to be said to you, you can really reflect on for a lot more time than probably we had from before. So again, keep that in mind. And again, just really to become better, and I mean the whole group and the whole cohort to become better at being more critical in terms of analysis and also in terms of self-improvement. There is, in my opinion, always something you can learn from someone else. And I think a peer review or a crit situation is really, really important in that process, in that you're confronted with other people's work and completely different ways of working and completely different interests and core concerns. And I think just seeing that, recognizing the value in that, is going to be really important for your practice moving forward. We're coming to the end now, but I think just some things to remember in the back of your head whenever you hear peer review or crit is that, again, the conventions that I listed are not mandatory, and they can and should be adapted depending on whatever exercise you're doing and also the kind of participants that are participating. So particularly in the fine art field, these are always kind of they're always kind of very, very tailored spaces. You're always in a room together. You kind of present individually or collectively your own responses, and kind of we are all expected to engage and to offer resources as standard. And also remembering that within the peer review, I think, lacking in confidence actually becomes a very big part of presenting, whether you're doing that in front of people or virtually. And so just recognizing that for a lot of people who aren't confident, whether it's just because of their own nature or because maybe of language barriers in particular or cultural barriers, that peer review spaces can be quite triggering and quite traumatic for some people. And so again, that's why I put the emphasis on having kind of compassion, really, and just allowing people to express their way in any way that they kind of can do that, particularly within peer review spaces where there is a lot of pressure on the individual, particularly to present ideas that are maybe very, very close to their heart and something maybe they haven't quite worked through yet. And again, just recognizing the partial success of the first peer review and the first kind of really formal critique that you may give someone. My first peer review, I mean, a lot of us didn't really know what was going on, and we just kind of tried our best to fact find, and we asked things wrong, and there were tears, and sometimes it can get very messy. But I think if you follow some of the conventions and just recognize that you're not going to get it right all of the time, I think there will be a lot of things to be learned. And again, once you do a peer review again and again and again, you can fine tune it and really just understand what you need out of the peer review and what you take from the peer review. So again, partial success, and knowing that whilst peer reviews and crits are important, they are, in my opinion, quite low stakes, I think. So guys, that is everything I can physically fit into a presentation within half an hour about peer reviews and crits. I hope it did give you a better understanding of what really is being asked of you when you're told to critique someone's work or to engage in a peer review. And I really just hope that you have a lot of fun with it more than anything. I think whilst they are very structured spaces, definitely have fun with it. See what your friends and your classmates are doing, and really just find the you within it, find the you within your group, and do your best to present in the only way possible. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, thank you very much, Raven, for that.